Hello, and welcome to the My Messy Church podcast. Each week, we'll be going through your questions from the weekend services and doing our best to present answers from a biblical perspective. If you haven't yet listened to the weekend sermon, I want to encourage you to head over to curtislake.org/media for context of what we will be discussing today. We love getting your questions and cannot wait to grow together. So, without further ado, let's dive into My Messy Church.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the My Messy Church podcast. For those of you that listen to all of these, if you were expecting another part to our previous recording, this is the other part. We decided to keep the week separate. And so the questions today are from a couple Sundays ago, if you're paying attention to dates. But basically, if you want to look at 1 Corinthians chapter 6, that's kind of where we were. And it was really around this whole topic of people in the church bringing lawsuits against other people in the church and bringing those lawsuits out into the world of the courts, which was creating all kinds of problems. And so we were really talking about the Christian ethic of non-retaliation, because Paul, he, on the one hand, certainly, accused the person that would perpetrate a wrong against another person, that they were a wrongdoer and were guilty of the kind of wickedness you would have expected from somebody that is not a follower of Jesus to be capable of, and so is telling them that they can't do that, they can't be like that, obviously. But then also to the person that was perhaps defrauded in some way or taken advantage of, Paul almost seems to suggest that it would be better for them to, instead of retaliating and eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, kind of go after this person in a court of law, to just suffer the wrongdoing. And yeah, it's kind of tough stuff, crazy. It's a crazy way to think and to believe, but there's really something in the ethic of Christianity that suggests that that's kind of the direction that we ought to go to when it comes to conflict that we experience in our lives. So anyway, that just sets a little bit of the background for that. So we're going to get into the questions, and I got to get to the right page here because I need to be able to read the questions. So give me 1 second. All right, here I am. All right. First question is, have verses 1-6 been twisted to hide bad behavior in the church, like scandals? How do we make sure that the truth comes to light when there is significant harm? So, yeah, I suppose obviously you can take what is being taught here and completely warp and twist it into something that Paul never intended, which is certainly not to cover things up, right? That's one of the things he was kind of dealing with in the previous chapter. Not so much that they were even covering up something or trying to keep it quiet. They just weren't doing anything about it. But the practical application of that is that the church has a responsibility of dealing with its business in a way that honors God and honors people and honors the kingdom of Jesus. And certainly hiding or suppressing the truth about something is not at all the ideal that we should be going after. Like, bad behavior has to be dealt with. And we kind of looked in the last podcast, the extent of communication that might be necessary depending on the scope of influence that a particular person might have had. Like I had given the example that if I was guilty of some wrongdoing, the way that I ought to be, the way that matter ought to be handled, and the extent of communication that ought to go out is much more significant than it would be for somebody else that maybe has just a very small little bit of influence. Let's not twist this to hide bad behavior. How do we make sure the truth comes to light when there is significant harm? I think the easy answer to that is we need to be brutally honest, right? We need to own what might happen, and not have this attitude where the institution of the church is more important than the people inside the church, right? That's usually where this thing goes really, really bad. Let's say there's some harm that's being done, some scandal that's occurring within a church, and leadership is, maybe leadership's a part of it, or a leader is a part of it, or even if it's not a leader, but leadership becomes aware of this thing. So the dilemma that they're going to have is this pressure to not want, like you don't want to be in the news, right? You don't want to be making headlines and all of a sudden have your church end up with a bad reputation in the community. And so that's where I think leaders can be tempted sometimes to try to make the problem go away, even if they try to do everything they can to deal with it, remove this person from the possibility that they could ever do it again, do everything they could to come alongside a person who's a victim of whatever the harm is, but then otherwise, it's like, hey, can we just try to deal with this, as quietly as possible? I mean, I think that's terrible. That's just not the way to go. I get it. I understand why you would feel the pressure to want to hide it. 'Cause again, you don't want to have this stain on your reputation. But I think what we need to do in an instance like that is we need to be brutally honest, and we need to come completely clean and be transparent, especially if something like that were to happen, and to weep and to grieve over it, and to do all the things like move forward with whatever procedures need to be done with regard to the person who created the offense. I mean, the fact is that sometimes people do criminal things, and if somebody does something criminal, then we need to let the criminal justice system deal with that in a way that is appropriate, right? And so if there's reporting that needs to be done, because of some sexual abuse, say, like we have policies in place that we've got this building is full of mandatory reporters who, if we become aware of something that is going on, a kid tells any one of us something, shares that with us, we can't keep that to ourselves. I could have a kid tell me something and I don't believe it, and I still have the requirement to take the fact of what this kid has told me and kind of move it along, and to ultimately start this process of having that thing reconciled. And that doesn't involve the church. And so what Paul's not saying is, he's not saying, hey, well, don't do that, we need to hide these things, and don't let DHS know, because that's a outside agency, a government agency. I mean, that's not at all what he's saying. A lot of what he was dealing with were these, what we would describe as torts, right? These problems of this, let's say, property, and other things like that involve litigation, and these grievances that a person would have against another. This person's they're playing their drums too loud at night, and my kids can't sleep, and you take them to court, right, over that. I mean, I'm sure that's not exactly what was happening, but Paul almost seems to dismiss the kinds of things that they were bringing one another to court for as being essentially something very, very negligible. So when we have things that are not negligible, I mean, we have to deal with them in the appropriate way, and also in a way that is lawful. I mean, we do live. Our church is not this sovereign nation inside of a nation where we just get to do whatever we want. We do have to live and abide by the laws of the land, to the extent that they don't contradict God's laws. And this is not a moral command necessarily. This is speaking to the way we treat one another within the body of Christ. So, brutal honesty, openness, transparency, own it, repent of it, figure out like where did the systems break down that allowed for something like whatever happened to happen in the first place, and fix it, patch the holes, make it right, and then do everything you can to ensure it will never happen again. Do everything you can to the extent possible, try to help the person or the people who've been victimized by that thing. But last thing you want to do is hide it. It's going to come out, and it's going to be known at some point. And when you've hidden it, not only have you just done the wrong thing, but like there's a really good chance that you've only compounded the harm that was inflicted on a person. And obviously that's not a good thing. Second question, how do you take this and consider it in an abusive situation? So I think we kind of hit that. I mean, like what Paul's not asking us to do is suffer abuse, right? There's never this expectation that a person needs to subject themselves to a stronger person that is abusing them. So if a person is guilty of committing physical abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse, like there's not this requirement that as a Christian, I have to continue to subject myself to that. That's not the point. The point isn't when Jesus says turn the other cheek, what he's not saying is that you have to like just plant your feet in concrete and stand there and take every single strike that comes your way. Like if you can get yourself out of a situation, get yourself out of a situation. If you can get help, like find rescue. Abuse should not be tolerated under any circumstances. What we were really kind of looking at is more the idea of retaliation, right? Like personal and retaliation of having this personal vendetta to get your way or to enact your own personal justice. When somebody does something that's abusive, like if it's, somebody is criminally harming another person in an abusive way, then that person needs to be held accountable for that and be punished for it. And it's perfectly right and appropriate to seek justice to be done in that regard. What would not be right would be for me to like enact my own revenge on that person. As a way to like sort of rebalance the scales and to re-justify what's been made wrong. Same with, and this kind of speaks to the attitude of our heart. But if I've been harmed by another person, and then that person is in fact held to account, and let's say some criminal proceedings occurred, and that person was declared guilty and was required to go to jail or to pay a fine or something like that. What I would want is, what I would hope for is that I had a heart that instead of celebrating with glee the punishment that person is undergoing, I would hope to have a heart that like grieved for the fact that person had to be punished for what they had done, even in carrying my own pain for how I had been harmed in that. I think that's oriented toward the way Jesus was when it came to people that accused him or treated him badly or ultimately crucified him. So, abuse needs to be dealt with. It needs to never be covered up. And certainly anybody that is a victim of abuse needs to find help and get away from the situation as far as possible, and not ever be put in a position where they're made to feel like to be a good Christian means to stand up and put up with that. All right, next question is, what about matters that are not with someone in the church? Are we to treat them the same? So I kind of mentioned in the message that like Paul wasn't specifically dealing with, let's say I have a matter of what ultimately could be litigation between, me and a non-believer. So yeah, I think it certainly, the possibility is there for me to go to a court and to have a matter dealt with that exists between me and a non-believer. But I think the principle still is the same. In fact, I mean, let me just be clear. I don't think that there is absolutely no such thing as a situation where a Christian and another Christian end up in a court of law. Like that. I mean, I think it'd be kind of silly to think that, okay, well, there's absolutely no situation whatsoever, no circumstance whatsoever where two Christians could end up in a court of law. Obviously that could happen, especially given the fact that, a lot of times, like, we can talk about ourselves as being Christians and yet live very, very unchristianly, right? So again, like, Paul's not trying to make this absolute statement. He's apparently like dealing with this problem of culture within the body where they're taking what things ought to be resolved within like, he didn't say don't resolve. He didn't say don't resolve the matter, right? That would have been nonsense to just everybody just ignore that anything bad has happened. What he's saying is that these matters in particular, he asked the question, he says, is there not somebody that's wise enough to stand as a judge in these matters? Can you really not find somebody within the church that can help to bring some resolution to this problem? That's the question. Now, are there certain things that the church is not equipped or has the authority to actually resolve between two people? Like, if I had two people in my church, two business owners, and there was some particular matter that involved what one is saying is $1 million worth of harm that the other party is guilty of, like, would I expect that we're going to sit down and kind of go over the details and then ultimately I'm going to render a verdict and they need to abide by that? I mean, pretty slim chance that probably is going to happen. Like, that's something that most likely is going to end up in court, and that's unfortunate. And we have to own that when that does happen. That's a problem, right? Like, the fact that Christians have somehow treated each other in such a terrible way that that something would end up in court. But anyway, so whether it's two Christians or a Christian and a non-Christian, there is an ethic that somehow we need to embrace a lot more within our lives, and that is this idea of being willing to suffer from the wrongdoing of another person toward us. And again, like, I'm not talking about abuse. I'm not talking about like violence that you just have to keep putting up with over and over again. It's more about, like, what do you do with this? What is the retaliation? What is it when it, like, let's say it's not physical abuse, but it's a person who hurls insults at you, either in front of other people or behind your back or online through social media. Like, what do you do with that? Do you retaliate and clean your reputation by making sure that the whole world knows that person's a liar, and then you empty out all the garbage that you have on that person so that everything that they said can then be discounted, and now you're restored back to your original reputation? See, that I think that'd be problematic. Like, that would probably cross the line, the ethical line of what it means to be a Christian. Next question. If we turn the other cheek, disputes won't be addressed. How can we combat this? Our culture doesn't allow for it, and you'd be labeled a fool. Yeah. So I think we just need to understand the principles here. When Jesus says turn the other cheek, what he means is don't hit that person back. Don't retaliate, right? Again, he's not saying just stand there and keep taking swipe after swipe after swipe until the other person tires out and gets bored and walks away. Nor does Jesus or Paul or anybody else expect that we should just let disputes go unsettled. Jesus, in fact, he gives us and the next question even talks about, Matthew 18, the procedure for handling disputes between two brothers, like the procedure of going to that person and telling them their offense and trying to work it out between them, instead of, just holding a grudge in your heart and never saying anything and just always hating that person for the rest of your life. You got to go to that person. You got to tell them. Sometimes they don't even know that they've done wrong or have hurt you, or the extent to which they've hurt you. And so if I'm the person who's been hurt or offended, it is my response. Jesus puts the responsibility on me to go to that person. Now that can be obviously that could be difficult if there's a power imbalance between those two individuals. Like, let's say that person is your boss, or that person is responsible for your paycheck, or that person has some kind of authority or some kind of power over you. I get that could be different. And so maybe you have to leverage the other systems that might be in place that allow you to make your grievances known, right? Like most workplaces have a grievance process. And so if it's too awkward and uncomfortable to go to your direct supervisor, but your problem is with your supervisor, then you go about the other process. But anyway, so if we turn the other cheek, disputes won't be addressed. So that's not what we mean. Like, we want to resolve disputes. We want for mending and healing and forgiveness and reconciliation to take place every time that it's possible. So this person says, how can we combat this? I suppose combat the idea that disputes won't be addressed. So I think we just did that, right? Let's address the disputes. Our culture doesn't allow for it, and you'd be labeled a fool. So yeah, I'd agree. If we never try to resolve a dispute, that would be foolish. So I think if that's what culture is saying, I agree with that. It's just it's a matter of how we go about resolving those conflicts that I think is really kind of the question. And then, like I alluded to, this next person says, Matthew 18 lies out the procedure for handling disputes. This practice needs to be taught and sometimes mediated in our culture. How do we reshape that? And I agree. And there's been times when there's been an opportunity within the life of our church to kind of do that. And sometimes it's worked, and I guess other times it hasn't, right? Because ultimately it's up to the parties that have a stake in whatever the issue is. It's very possible that there could be this dispute between two people, and the ultimate resolution of that is one person goes away from the church angry and never comes back again, and just hates the church for the rest of their lives and hates that person for the rest of their lives. I mean, there's nothing we can do to fix or to solve that. So we want to work to resolve disputes as much as possible, to keep the family intact, recognizing that a lot of times it's going to be done imperfectly. A lot of times it's going to ultimately end in a result that is not ideal, but yeah, it doesn't keep us or preclude us from needing to try whenever possible to do that. Next question. You mentioned what we say to toddlers. What do you think this looks like when we teach our little children about what to do in conflict? I don't even know if I want to answer this question, because I don't know how to manage toddlers. It's been a lot of years. My youngest is 18 years old, and I have no grandkids. So I don't know. Maybe Shayna can chime in later on and share how to. Yeah, this is why they don't let me work in the early learning center program, because I'd be like, I just rile the kids up, try to. Anyway, what do you think this looks like when we teach our little children about what to do in conflict? I'm kind of joking and not joking. Yeah, I think we do. I mean, it is kind of this joke, right? Where, kids getting bitten by another kid, and the parents finally get fed up and tired of it. And they're like, all right, just bite him back or bite her back. That'll be the end of that. I don't know if that's good parenting strategy or not. I'm going to guess not, but, I think toddlers they're very, 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 very little people. And they are a long way from having the their mental faculties all very well developed. And so I don't know, you'll have to pass that one on to a child psychologist. But I think obviously it goes without saying, do your best to model. And if you're seeing, like, let's say you have a toddler that when the toddler is interacting with other toddlers and they get hit, that they hit back. Yeah. Try to maybe help them find another remedy besides retaliation. Finally, does practicing Christianity include magnanimity? Is, quote unquote, turn the other cheek consistent with Christ's actions, including his crucifixion? So yes, I think that's really kind of what the message was all about. This pursuit of, being the kind of person that has the moral fabric to extend forgiveness toward other people, rather than the very opposite would be to be very, very petty and to always try to retaliate against another person's offense. So there's some people, like, when I say petty, you know what I mean, right? You know, somebody who, man, it's just every little thing. I mean, they just get, in the slightest way, they get their nose bent for whatever reason, and they can't let it go. They can't dismiss it. They've got to write it. They've got to let you know. And wow, well, that feels like a really heavy load of a way to live. And so we should be growing as more magnanimous kinds of people, right? Where we have the moral framework and robustness to overlook other people's faults, right? That's one of the ways that love is ultimately manifested, right? Love covers a multitude of sins. What does that mean? It's like, well, I know that they're going to sin against me constantly. They're going to get on my nerves. They're going to even, sometimes they might even do things that I know they did on purpose to hurt me. Is the right response to just hurt them back so that they learn, hey, you don't mess with this one right here, or you're going to get some, or is it, I'm going to do my best with God's help to sort of like rise above it, and not try to right every wrong or to retaliate against every offense. Did Jesus model this? Yes. I think the words, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they are doing. It doesn't really get more magnanimous than that. All right, great questions. That's all we have for this week. And hope you have a great week, and see you next time.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of My Messy Church. If you haven't done so yet, be sure to head to your app store and download the Curtis Lake Church app for easy access to all of our content. Thank you so much for joining us, and we can't wait to be with you next week.